All right, guys. Paul Linn here. Thanks for joining. If you have not done so yet, please like, subscribe for any more content. So it seems like the hot topic and the topic of the day right now is discussion around contracts involved in arm wrestling. So I felt like I just wanted to weigh in on this, from as objective perspective as I possibly can. Um, but also the perspective of someone who has been offered a contract and signed it in the past, and who has also been offered a contract in this current situation. In light of everything that's going on, I feel like I kind of want to just shed a little light. So I think I try and pride myself on the ability to have empathy for people's perspectives. While also understanding their perspective and trying to put myself in their shoes from their vantage point in life. Um, so when I look at the whole contract thing and I see some of the responses that Angen's getting and like on different videos and things of that nature, they seem to be largely negative, which I understand because contracts involve restrictions. So they involve restrictions, and what may be perceived as lack of freedoms, but they also involve guarantees. So that's where the trade-off is. So I think during COVID, a lot of arm wrestlers who were at one point under contract with WAL, kind of in the moment, swore off the idea of contracts and the restrictions involved. Because I think a lot of arm wrestlers had the opportunity and or were forced into the situation where they had to figure out their own means of getting matches and different things. And I think when we step back and we look at this thing, we have to look at it in different categories. So there's really the small category of arm wrestlers who support their families and themselves and their incomes solely off of arm wrestling, which, I mean, there's only a couple names in that book in the United States, right? So there may be some, oh, I know there's plenty more in Europe, based on, I don't want to say sponsorship, but maybe government funding and things, for competition where they can actually focus and be true professional athletes. But in this country, there's only a couple names of people that actually garner their full income from the sport of arm wrestling in one way, shape, or form. So that's a category of its own. The rest of us who love arm wrestling, regardless of how serious we take it or don't take it, we fall into the rest category, which I think these two categories are really important to look at, because at the end of the day, a lot of us love the sport. Started off doing it, spending a boatload of money to do it, to travel, to train, time away from our family, and we were doing it purely for the love. And I know that's how I got started. I was addicted. I got bit by the bug, man. I was like, tell my wife, like, this is like the greatest thing for me right now. It's gonna keep me young. I got goals. I got all kinds of stuff. And she was like, I support you, And I went off and I did my thing, and I hit like some crazy 27 tournaments in the first year or something nutty. And I traveled to train and I did everything, and I spent tens of thousands of dollars to do it. And it was because I loved it, and it was giving me back more than I was spending in the value that it brought to my life. So fast forward a couple of years, the WAL, I start getting involved in that, but I was on the back end of that. And, the contracts come out. And I know there's a lot of notable arm wrestlers who stayed away from it, because they didn't want the restrictions. They didn't want that. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. And part of me at that time really identified with that. That said, when WAL offered me a 5-year contract, I had all these thoughts in my mind like, oh man, I'm going to scrutinize this and blah, blah, blah. But when that contract's in front of you and you're like, okay, now I have the opportunity to pull at a higher level, compete at a higher level, be challenged at a higher level. If your value system lends itself to being a part of the biggest, highest level competition that there is, it makes the decision a lot more simple than you may have thought it was. So at the end of the day, I signed that contract with not a whole lot of thought. I talked to my wife a little bit about it. I didn't even send it to, I didn't even, I talked to other WAL pullers. I didn't send it to a lawyer or anything like that. I signed it. I said, this is the best thing, you know, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. This is the best thing that has, is out there right now for us in the U.S. So signed it. In hindsight, like dealing with some of the restrictions, I didn't have any personal issues with it. Anything that I asked for, um, any like leeway that I needed to go compete elsewhere was never really a question. The duration of the contract was a little lengthy. And with COVID, obviously it didn't hold up their end, so it kind of voided it out. But that said, I know plenty of other arm wrestlers who thought the same way and then got the contract and were glad to sign it. And I was glad to represent WAL at the time because it was the biggest and best thing. Now you fast forward to now, we go through COVID, we all figure out our own way and everything else, and then we enter some of these promotions, King of the Table and East versus West. And the difference between these two leagues and organizations, number one, WAL really didn't afford us the opportunity to pull the best in the world or the Europeans per se. So it depends on what your goals are, right? It depends on what you want to do, and what things you are willing to accept to, it's all about your value system. So for me, when I got the offer from Engen to pull my first match, I mean, I was ecstatic because this is my opportunity to get outside of my comfort zone. Let me pull at a higher level. Let me test myself against the people that no one thinks I can compete with. And again, I'm not looking at it, never was really looking at it as a monetary thing. My drive is not from that. My income doesn't come from arm wrestling. I mean, of course, there's some money to be made now and everything, but that's not my deciding factor. It never has been. Maybe it's icing on the cake, and I know it's nice not to spend money on arm wrestling. I do appreciate that. That I can travel and everything without spending money on arm wrestling. But the flip side is we have to look at it from a business perspective. Time away from family, time away from work, time away from things that make you money is also a sacrifice. So, depending on, what your time is worth monetarily to you, it could be perceived a million different ways. And it all depends on your situation and your value system. So for me, I'm happy with being able to travel, at a slight gain or a wash. I'm okay with that, to do the thing that I like to do, to test myself, to push myself, to have goals, because I know what that nets me on the back end is far more valuable than money. So that aside, Engen, after dealing with Engen more and more, I pride myself in being a decent judge of character, and I had always thought highly of Engen. But I know, he can get into it with people and he can be very passionate on social media. And I understand this about him. But my personal interactions with Engen have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, time and time again, that his intentions are in the right place. I believe that to be true based on my interactions, based on my observations, and based on me being as objective as I possibly can. So for me, it is very easy to get behind somebody that I understand and believe wholeheartedly to be genuine, which I do. And he has proven to me time and time again without intentionally doing so. So that promotion, the concept behind it has always been like very interesting to me. East versus West, the idea of us getting to test ourselves against the superior athletes in the sport right now, the more dominant athletes. I value that. I value the team mentality. I value the team aspect. I've also spoken prior to this contract discussion how I really loved Engen's ability to have everyone trust him and come and he pays them, no questions asked, handshake agreement. This is all on integrity. And I love that. I love that about Engen. And because of that, because Engen is an arm wrestler and not a businessman first, that is the separation between WAL and East versus West, in my opinion. Steve Kaplan, known quantity. He's a businessman. I can kind of predict what he's going to do. It's going to be financial. So for me, I need to understand what am I dealing with. If I understand it, and I can gather information, make an opinion, and make an educated decision on whether I want to sign a contract with this business or with this promoter, or whatever the case, but or with Engen, who I know has the best interests at heart. Um, I can sign a contract with a business person because I understand what his goals are. I can also sign a contract very easily with somebody who I know, based on my personal experience and my personal discussions with, has the utmost integrity and the best possible intentions for the sport. So when I look at all these things, and I'm seeing comments where people are saying like this is bad. There's no good side to this. This is a net negative. I think you got to kind of step back and try and put yourself in the shoes of the arm wrestler. And the arm wrestler is not all the same. Some arm wrestlers are going to be surely just about money. They're just looking at what is that dollar amount, and I'm going to go there. To me, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe that's a little bit of a mercenary mentality, and there's nothing wrong with it. Go make money. But me personally, I'm less about that. I'm more about the idea of competing with the best, love the team mentality, love the idea that, what Engen puts into it. I know what he puts into it emotionally. I know what he puts into it financially. I know the risks he takes. I understand it. I understand it from a smaller scale, from a promoter on my end. But I can't even imagine toying with the overhead that he does. We're talking about like $250,000 overhead for these events, and events that do take losses. So, and I know that, the sponsorship and all the other things, he needs more of that, and he's doing it basically off his own dollar. So I know his intentions are pure. I know the passion and that he puts into the sport. So it's easy for me to get behind that. And people say, well, why would you restrict yourself? Restrict myself? I can only pull effectively, you know, 4, maybe 5 times a year. And with my schedule as a football coach, I know that I probably can't even do that 4th or 5th one. So for me, I know it's probably 3, maybe 4 good times a year. Where do I want to compete? Um, if I know that I'm getting set number of matches at set dollar amount, it's a known quantity. It's a guarantee. And win or lose, that's still part of the contract. That's what protects the athlete. You can go to a promotion. If you lose, nobody's knocking on your door for a match again. So that there is some of the hidden benefits for the arm wrestler themselves. And if you're a competitive person, you're going to try and win regardless. But that's just a fail-safe and a safety net if you do in fact lose. So there are pros and cons to all of these things. Now, taking all that away, when you look at the idea of growth for a sport, um, there's been so much comparison between MMA. Some parts of that comparison are fair, some aren't. But in order to legitimize, um, contracts will always become a part. It's the natural progression of the things. We've been riding a really good high during COVID where we have all these promotions and people are all free agents, and super awesome. I love it. I love that, freedom and everything else. But I also understand for the growth of the sport, there has to become levels of organization, um, and there has to be some out of one of these leagues or whatever, there has to become a front runner. Now, I don't know what that front runner is going to be, but when I look at like everything's out there and what do I want to be a part of, I'm rooting for East versus West, Core Sports, King of the Table. I'm rooting for them because I'm behind them for a number of reasons, um, and mainly because at this juncture, these are the promotions that are bringing the best together and giving me the opportunity to test myself against the best consistently. Production quality is going up. Everything's going up. I love being a part of it. I love the energy. I love the way it is in Turkey. I love how professional I feel doing these things. And I've said it before, this is the promotion that has made me feel the most professional. So it's easy for me to get behind this promotion. That said, I'm also rooting for them. Whether the Core Sports platform wins out or another promotion comes along, I'll still be an arm wrestler. Doesn't mean that, down the road, whatever happens, um, that I'm going to be, who knows who's going to come out on top. But I'm rooting for East versus West. So it's easy for me to get behind them. It's easy for me to sign the contract because I genuinely enjoy what I'm doing over what I'm getting paid. Now you take into account the pay and you start comparing back to MMA. I know a lot of, journeyman beginner fighters. And I know, when they prepare for a match, how much effort, time they put in and what their purses are. And MMA is established in this country, and there are many, many small promotions throughout the country, throughout the world. But I know these aspiring professional fighters, how much they don't get paid. And I look at our small niche sport, and I look at the contracts WAL offered without speaking any details, and now of course, we're in East versus West, and I can say, looking at these things, even though maybe it's apples to oranges, it's incredibly generous in my opinion. It doesn't take a whole lot to make me happy, and these guys are exceeding that. So it's not my number one drive, but it is, still a factor that you have to look at, because when you're looking at things from a black and white perspective, those are the numerical statistics that can be looked at in a black and white fashion. But again, at the end of the day, that's not my deciding factor. And at this juncture, to me, it's the best option, and it's the thing that I can get behind morally and emotionally. Like I really like, I just really enjoy it, and it motivates me. So that to me is worth more than money. And when I look at my schedule and all those things involved, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. So I think when we look at these things, I don't think we should look at this as something that is a negative or a step back for the sport. I think it is in fact the opposite. It's kind of a necessary evil, depending on how you want to look at it. And I don't think that it necessarily will or should create a divide. Now, if there are competitive leagues that come out and want to sign people, international people, whatever, then maybe we step into that, divide. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm hoping it's not. The other thing is, at this juncture, I do not know all of the athletes who have in fact been offered contracts. What I do know is that it is a small number, and I'm blessed to be a part of that small number, and I'm incredibly thankful. But in order for it to become a problem, it would need to be where there are so many different options of contracts and they're all exclusive. So we'll see where it goes. No way to tell. And no way to tell who's going to sign where or do what. But just because you signed a contract doesn't mean that there is no negotiation beyond that. So there is negotiation room in contracts. There are, clauses and things of that nature. And there's nothing to stop two organizations, let's say it's Pride and UFC, coming together and having their heavyweight champions meet. So this isn't the end of the world. In my opinion, it's actually possibly the next step. So I would encourage everybody to keep an open mind. I don't think anything negative is about to happen because of the announcement here. I think things will continue to progress. I don't think this is a road bump. I think we are entering possibly the next phase of professionality in the sport. And I think it's best to do our best to show empathy, try and see all sides of the story, see all perspectives, and keep an open mind. And whether we agree or not, at the end of the day, it's still really just opinion, and it's still based off of personal perspective and your personal value system. And as an arm wrestler and a fan, I am both. I can see and I can put myself in most people's shoes and see from both of those perspectives, and I understand the concern and the considerations that are going into it. But I would ask everybody, put yourself in the arm wrestler's shoes, put yourself in the promoter's shoes, who's taking the huge risk. I'm happy with doing that. With supporting Engen because I know where his value system is. He's not going to do wrong by the community. Definitely never intentionally, and I don't think that we are on the wrong path. So look, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Keep an open mind. And like Coach Ray says, stay strong and love arm wrestling.